Hello, welcome to the February 16th meeting of Somerville's Urban Forestry Committee. I'm Chris Vaughn, I'm the co-chair. Pursuant to the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be held remotely. We're going to make minutes and audio-video recording available as soon as practical on the city's website. I'm going to share the agenda. And as we do here, I'm going to go, let's start with introductions of committee members who are here, and then we will take it from there. So if Amy Myrtle, if you'd be willing to introduce yourself, that would be wonderful.
Hello, my name's Amy. I am a committee member. My background is in community ecology of insects and their relationships with plants. I have my daughter home with me. She's sick today, so I have my camera off at the moment, but see if I can turn it on later. Good to meet everybody.
Fantastic. And then we always go alphabetically by first name because that's how it shows up on my screen. So Breck Miller, you're up next.
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name is Breck Miller. I'm the city tree warden.
Thank you. And then Jennifer Clifford.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I'm a plant pathologist by training. I'm interested in plant health. I'm also interested in life cycles of plants as they relate to changes in our climate. I'm just interested in helping the city of Somerville have the best urban forest that we can and engaging the community to help us achieve these goals together. Thank you.
Thank you. And Leah Grossman.
Hello, my name's Leah Grossman. I'm a landscape architect working in Boston, living in Somerville, and I'm very excited to help the city diversify our urban forest and think about maintenance and how we can engage residents in the maintenance of our green spaces and our urban canopy.
Thank you. I am going through looking to see if others joined. Actually, Vanessa Bukili, sorry.
No problem. I'm Vanessa Bukili, the Senior Urban Forestry Landscape Planner for the city. Interested in all urban forestry matters, really, and primarily in charge of tree planting in the city.
Thank you. I am going through now, as we do in this session, actually just making sure we have somebody taking notes. Thank you, Breck. Any other housekeeping? Cool. I am going through and turning everybody who I possibly can into a panelist, which means that you'll be able to see who else is here. You'll be able to unmute yourself and you'll be able to participate in the conversation if you wish. Nobody is obligated to turn on their camera or participate directly, but if you wish to, you are welcome to. And this next item on our agenda is resident concerns. We always like to start with hearing why people chose to show up. If you have a particular reason why you were here, particular topic, or a brief concern, you are welcome to go ahead and share it now. I'm not going to call names because that feels pushy. Hello, Crystal Huff. All right. It's Meinhold and Bittersdorf. Excellent. It is nice to see everybody's faces. Yes, Jennifer Clifford.
If nobody else has a resident concern, I have something that I would like to bring up. As a resident, I was walking down Somerville Ave in front of like Machu Picchu restaurant. And I don't know if anybody's noticed before, I hadn't noticed it before, but there are electrical outlets. I think they're outlets. They're up kind of high in the tree, but the conduit runs from someplace along the sidewalk, goes up along the tree and is attached in the canopy of the tree. And the conduit itself is attached by tape or zip ties. And these are fairly small trees. I'd never noticed it before. I was wondering if anybody has any information on that. I don't know if it's necessarily good for these younger trees to have that. Is there another way that these could be I don't know what they're for. You know, if anybody has some insight in that, I'd like to hear. That kind of bothered me a bit to see it.
I have some insight. It's sort of a placeholder from them putting twinkle lights on all of the young trees. I think we're moving away from that on young trees at least, but that was the power source for those twinkle lights. We've gotten, I think, all the twinkle lights, or most of them at least, removed from those trees as part of our, we needed to do it. We wanted to do it, and we needed to do it to do some young tree training for those trees last year. So those lights got removed. Whenever I go by, I do a peek on those trees and like clip zip ties that seem too tight. Yeah, we're trying to move away from having twinkle lights on at least the younger trees, but that's sort of a bigger discussion with other parties.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
If anyone notices anything like strangling a tree, let me know, or Breck know, and we'll fix it and try to work with the grounds and highways teams to make sure they keep an eye on those things too. I know I saved a bunch of trees in assembly that were getting girdled in that way a year or two ago. So
Yeah,
keep an eye out.
All right, because there were maybe 3, maybe 4, at least 3, maybe 4 trees just in one stretch that have this going on still. So, okay, thank you.
Any other resident concerns? Actually, I see Tori Antonino has joined the meeting twice. Hopefully that means that you're actually connected once. If you would like to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Tori Antonino. I am a co-chair of the Urban Forestry Committee, and I'm a proponent of using our private and public spaces as a place to regenerate our ecosystem and help our critters who are most in need to have their homes back, have a place to live. And that's it. Thank you. I'm going to be off camera today. I'm not feeling very well, so. Chris, are you okay to chair?
I'm okay to chair.
Okay. All right, thanks.
I always trust people on the camera choices and the audio choices. I figure we all get that option. All right. So moving on, we have a presentation from Green Streets. Is that, I don't see anybody logged in by a name that I recognize. Is that Nick?
So I just saw an email from Matt, and he said, this was 3 minutes ago. He's like, link.
Okay.
He couldn't find it, so I just sent it to him. So hopefully he'll be here presently.
All right. Well, when he shows up, we like to, if somebody's a guest at the meeting, we like to let them go early on so they seems to show respect for their time. We'll move on. If he manages to get logged in, then we will get a presentation then. But checking. All right, so let's move on to city updates. And whenever our presenter shows up, we'll turn it back to them. But, I guess, Breck, this is you for city tree removals.
Yep. Feels like I've been saying this for a while now, but I am expecting to have a contract up and running, a new contract up and running in the next few weeks. So at this moment, I don't have a list for you, but I probably will, hopefully, fingers crossed, for the next meeting.
Cool. Is there anything you can share about the full-time staff tree crew?
Not very much, except, you know, I've been hearing that we're close for a long time now. Now I'm hearing that we're very close. So it does sound like progress is being made. Exactly where we stand, I can't say, but it sounds like we're getting there. So
Cool. For anybody who's not familiar, the tree crew are the folks with bucket trucks and chainsaws and chippers who keep us safe from mature trees that need to be maintained or removed. Those jobs reside in DPW right now. We don't don't have anybody in those roles. So DPW has a series of contracts with tree maintenance companies to do removals and pruning in batches. Right, so then do we have an update on private tree removals, permits and exceptions?
I'll take that one. I think Malik has updated the spreadsheet, so that should be ready to view. It looks like there hasn't, I don't recall too much activity going on yet this year, but there's been four exemptions for tree removals that were invasive or dangerous dying trees. And so far this year, there have been 7 permit applications. None of them have been issued yet, according to this spreadsheet, so they're still pending. There's probably some information still to be collected for these permits.
Okay. So the exam.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just skimming through. We had hazardous, 42-inch silver maple, huge. It
was falling apart.
Invasive, invasive. Okay, these are all. The exemptions are if they're invasive, if they're hazardous, if they're dead, they're kind of sort of no longer even a tree under some definitions. And then there's another exemption for if it's on an owner-occupied property of less than 3 units.
So that's not actually an exemption, that last case, that's a waiver. So that would they still have to apply for a permit, but then they wouldn't need to, they would receive a waiver from replanting or paying into the tree fund.
Okay, so then looking at permit applications, that sounds right to me. And yeah, a few new ones. 50 trees for Clarendon Hill project. Right, and we talked about that last time. I always just like to skim. If I see large numbers, I want to be sure that I understand, because people talk, people have questions.
Excellent. The 74 Middlesex also has a number of trees. Most of those were exempt. They were mostly Ailanthus and other invasives. There was 2 trees they had listed as unknown, so we required them to put in a permit for those, but they're going to be replanting a lot of trees, so it's a big development project. And they may have been unknown because they were dead, but they can't prove it, so they put in a permit application.
All right. I will just say I am really proud of this process. Like, we had nothing like this 5 years ago, and now we've got real coordination. I feel like we know what's going on. I feel like this is one of the processes that we've successfully built in the city over the past couple of years, and I think it's great. I think it's exactly what we needed. Any questions or comments on permits or removals? Okay, I will go back to the agenda then.
Next up is the Parks Tree Health Program, which I will also take. So you guys probably remember from previous years, we started a Parks Tree Health Program a few years ago where we cycle through the different parks in the city and look at all of the trees in those parks, whichever ones we designate, and see what needs to be done to those trees. Sometimes it's removal, very limited removals, just when they're dead or dangerous. Mostly it's a lot of pruning work and sometimes some soil work to make the trees healthier and be more vibrant and live longer, hopefully. So we are getting ready to start the Parks Tree Health Program for this year. The website has been updated, so I'm sending the link there. It's such a long link, but we are going to be doing 7 different parks this year. We're going to start next week with Glen Park and Capuano Field. We are also working on Grimmins Park, Kenny Park, Morse Kelly, Dickerman Playground, Stone Place Park, and then the trees around the City Hall Concourse and 1895 building. So it's, a good number of parks here where it's nearly 300 trees that are going to get worked on. I'm really excited about it. Any questions?
This, just to say, from my part, there is always at least one concerned resident who calls around to various places and reports that there are people with chainsaws doing something to trees in the parks. And so if you know that person and they rely on you for information, just let them know that there is actually a park tree health program, and it's okay. We're not cutting down all the trees in the parks. This is actually a planned thing.
Yeah.
And my recollection on that is there is a banner, right? Isn't there a banner that gets hung too? So
Yeah.
that I think helped.
Yeah, we have 2 banners, and it's very, very official looking, like they'll close down the whole park and start doing work on it, but people can get worried, so.
Sure, yeah.
My standard on notification has always been, it is not possible for everybody to have heard, but when somebody starts worrying, I want the person next to them to have heard of it. So they're like, you don't see the banner right there? That is adequate. It's okay if somebody misses it.
Absolutely, yeah, but it does help, when you're walking by. Because I remember the first time I ever saw it, when I was like, what are they doing? Then I saw the big banner, so yeah.
Right, and just checking, I still don't see Mr. Carlino. And now Tori and I have both emailed a link. So let's move on to the Young Tree Training Program.
All right, so in coordination with, well, not exactly in coordination, but another proactive tree maintenance program we started around the same time as the Parks Tree Health Program is our Young Tree Training Program. And this is where we do important structural pruning to our youngest, nearly youngest trees throughout the city. They're trees that are planted about 3 years ago through maybe 5 or 10 years ago. It sort of depends on the size of the tree. We're focusing on small trees that have established enough that we're not going to be hurting them by doing some important pruning work, but that are ready for some structural pruning and dead wood pruning and maybe limbing up for clearing streets and sidewalks to really give them the best start to their life. I think this is our 4th year of the program, so we're cycling back to starting we try to prune all of our young trees on a 3-year cycle. So since we're in the 4th year, we're looping back to some of those trees that were originally pruned 3 years ago and are adding in the new ones that have been planted since. This program for this year started, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, so you might see someone also driving around in a truck working on young trees, mostly street trees around the city. It's a single person pretty much with their truck and doing work from the ground, so it's not maybe as drastic looking, but I happened to be driving around and saw him today and was excited to see it in action. So our young trees are also getting some much needed love. We have a website for that as well. I'll try to pull that up.
Yeah, the website would be a help. I remember last year we got some concern, first off, that there was some rogue person with clippers just going after trees. And in every case, they're sort of lifting and then getting the growth centralized. And then we got one bit of concern that the sap came out of the cut spots and it looked bad. And I have been watching that tree and that tree is fine. So as expected, it worked out okay.
Right. Yeah, some of them might get a little weepy as the sap starts to run, but it's totally fine for them. And it's a good time of year to prune them now because we can see the structure really well, and it's we're not cutting off a bunch of leaves. It's before they've put a lot of effort into making all their leaves too.
Cool.
I had a question on if we're on a previous item that I thought I didn't realize we had moved on to.
Mm-hmm.
Once we're done with this item, I just want to go back. So
Are we good with tree training? Any further comments, questions? Just to say, this is another thing we didn't used to do, and this is the product of the mayor allocating and Vanessa advocating for, and the city council allocating budget so that we can actually do this. Like, this is a relatively new program, and I am thrilled after the investment. You know, each of our young trees costs, give or take, $1,000 all in to go from no tree present to young tree planted. Seems very, very like a real good idea to protect that investment this way. So I'm glad to see it happening.
Is Northeastern the company that's doing it too, or is this contracted with a different person?
Our
It's
young
Barrett.
tree training program is Barrett.
Okay. Okay, so my question, in the Parks Tree Health Program, is that, will trees be planted? Or is it just an assessment of health? And what does that look like? And I'm sorry if you might have said this and I was blinking or something. So
Sure. So the Parks Tree Health Program is focused on the existing trees in the park. So planting is not part of this program. However, we do sometimes identify locations where planting could be needed. So there is a portion of the program that's creating a work plan and then doing the work, and then the final portion is creating a final report. So if there was like a big gap of, you know, where there's no trees, then that might be noted in the final report. We are also, usually Malik is on site at all these parks, at least at some point while the work's being done, so may make some observations, but in general, the planting is separate from the Parks Tree Health Program. But I, you know, as you know, plant 175 or so trees every year, and that includes on park properties. So if you have some ideas of where some parks could use some more trees, let me know and I'd be happy to look into it.
Yeah, and typically if we need to remove any trees in parks, Vanessa's very keen on replacing those.
thank you.
All right, so we do have Mr. Carlino here. Let's just put a pin in it that we have not yet gotten to spring tree planting. And I would like to go back. I do see a question in the chat, which counts as a resident concern for me. And the question is, to summarize, there is an Elianthus that is on the property line, and it's rotted and probably hazardous. And there's like what are the question at the end of the day is, what's the right thing for a resident to do? What are the options to protect themselves from an invasive species that looks increasingly hazardous and their neighbors not taking action on it with them?
It sort of depends a little bit on where the tree is. So we can issue permits, as it looks like you got a permit or exemption for private tree removal. So we can let people remove trees and keep track of it, but we can't force them to remove trees on private property. If the tree is like right next to a sidewalk and it's dangerous and falling apart, where it might endanger the public passersby on the sidewalk, then we can issue a notice that we see this tree, we're notifying you that it's dangerous, and if you don't remove it, you're the one liable for it. So it sort of puts a little bit of impetus in the owner's realm to get it removed. But if it's sort of a setback tree or a backyard tree, then it's really more of a neighbor dispute. And unfortunately for this case, the city urban forestry staff can't get involved in that regard.
I would just add, my understanding, and like Vanessa said, we don't get involved in neighbor disputes, but my understanding of the laws about trees on private property is if there is an obvious defect in this tree and it's on your neighbor's property, but abutting your own property, it, you know, this is not legal advice and I'm not a lawyer, but the owner of the tree does have a responsibility. If there is a very obvious defect or hazard associated with that tree, they do have a legal responsibility to maintain the tree.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And just to clarify, it is right up next to the sidewalk and branches are falling and it seems unsafe and becoming seemingly more quickly that way. It's deteriorating pretty fast. And he hasn't responded to me in like a year and a half or two. So just trying to, so what process do I take to get that information to whom, to get the nudge to him?
So if it's something that's abutting public property and you know, you think there's a clear hazard that actually would potentially impact the public, if you could just send me the address to trees@somervillema.gov, I can take a look at it. And if it sort of ticks the boxes, then I can certainly send a letter to the owner of the property saying you have this hazardous tree that needs to be dealt with either by pruning or removal of the tree.
Okay.
If the hazardous situation is more on the private property side of things, I would recommend the state actually has a great website that has sort of various cases of neighbor disputes involving trees and sort of the outcome of legal cases and things like that. And it's got a lot of good resources. I don't know the website off the top of my head.
Link is in the chat. I dropped it a couple minutes ago.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's like tree law in Massachusetts. So there's a lot of good info on there as well. But yeah, if you can send us the address, I'd be happy to check it out.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And just to say that is one of the uncomfortable situations, and it can be stressful. So I hope everything turns out well. All right. So Matt Carolino, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was late. I was like frantically trying to figure out how to get into the meeting. I just like spazzed out on the website.
No worries at all. I have already made you a panelist. Now I'm going to make you the presenter, and we will see whether the GoToMeeting spirits are aligned today. So I'm going to stop showing and presenter over to you. And now we will see.
All right.
This is another thing that's gotten better over time. Wow, it just worked.
Did it work?
Yes. And you're
Okay.
not in presenter mode. If you can, I can see it fine, but if it's possible to go presenter mode, sometimes that hurts. That helps.
I have no idea. Change to presenter. No. I have no idea how to do present. Oh, we can do the slideshow. Does that work?
Yes, that is absolutely amazing.
All right. Do you see this like this thing on the side of my screen?
We just see the slides.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I've got like 9 slides to go through, but it starts with like a 1-minute video. So can you guys hear the music in the video?
I cannot.
You guys can't hear the audio in the video?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so I won't do the video. So this is, go back to that slide. So this presentation is really going to talk about like green streets and a green streets program and green infrastructure in general. And green streets are using our public infrastructure to capture and treat and store storm and flood water before it even enters into our sewer system. So a lot of this is used in lieu of digging up pipe systems and doing like sewer stormwater expansions and really, really expensive infrastructure projects. And what you end up getting with them is you get a ton of co-benefits You get improved neighborhood aesthetics, more areas for trees, pollinators, daylighting. So this is from EPA's Green Streets Guide. They reissued a new one in 2021. And a lot of the components in here are things that are easily adaptable in really any city. So bioretention basins, permeable pavements. So, I mean, going a little bit further into like what green infrastructure is, like it's really a lot of the things that we want to accomplish as a city. It's green jobs. It's the definition of climate resilience. As increased storms happen, there's going to be more flood water. How are you going to manage that with your current infrastructure? It's mobility improvements. The bump out on the bottom of the screen shows extra daylighting, smaller streets, safer environments. It's equity. You put these in every single neighborhood in a lot of cities like Philadelphia and Portland have proved, in New York City, that these don't just go in your fancy neighborhoods. These are really supposed to be implemented in every single neighborhood that you have, especially the ones that have less tree canopy, because the environmental benefits of improved air quality, urban heat island effect reduction, those are really needed in a lot of your communities of concern. This is a preferred approach than gray infrastructure is for the EPA. EPA has been supporting and funding and advancing green infrastructure for about 30 years. This is really like an initiative of all of their regions nationally. In 2019, the city did a green infrastructure feasibility study, and their consultant said that there was ample opportunities to implement it in the city. So we're hoping for is more of like a formalized version of that. This really ties into a ton of the city initiatives and 2040 summer vision topics. The ones that are probably most pertinent to you, your group, is how are we going to get that 105 acres of natural environment and public space back? That is our 2040 goal. And green infrastructure is one of those things that really can contribute significantly to that. You don't have to take people's properties away to do that. You don't have to take away buildable environment to do this. Our public right-of-ways have room in a lot of areas, and that can really be maximized on that. And it could be tied into like our safe streets or bike network plan, native plants. It really is how we can accomplish a lot of these goals once we start coupling it with the infrastructure component, the one that actually gets funded. And from some case studies, I mean, Philadelphia and New York City have had probably the most significant savings with green infrastructure. We're talking about billions of dollars in less infrastructure costs by switching from tanks, tunnels, and pump house projects into really this low impact development method. The ROI is related to the co-benefits. So like that's your improved air quality, your tree canopy, your public realm, all of that. That's ROI, and you can calculate that. And EPA is a model for calculating that. And using that model, Philadelphia was able to calculate pretty much $1 per gallon stored as return on investment. They've stored 2.8 billion gallons so far with their green infrastructure program. And that's really the benefit. Like Lancaster, Pennsylvania is closer in size to us. Their program was $300 million. They're saving 140. And they're doing projects like the one on the right side of this screen. I mean, a comparable neighborhood would be Broadway in Somerville, Foss Park. There's also a lot of room on areas like Somerville Ave. I know you guys had talked about that at the last meeting. I think Tori had brought it up. And like, yeah, like the urban areas that we have that are really devoid of life can significantly benefit from a green infrastructure approach. Livability, just wanting to actually walk down those streets, getting covered from the sun in the summer. So kind of like a deeper dive into New York City's program, the $3.9 billion on the right side of the screen, that was their tanks, tunnels, and expansions program. And they just decided to completely eliminate that and go for this $1.5 billion in public green infrastructure investment and then changing their zoning to allow private industry and to implement things like green roofs and really kind of have like the private component take on some of that burden. But in total, it would save them around $2.4 billion or $2.5 billion in public funds that they're using for other programs, and they're getting all the co-benefits out of it. So from the case studies that we've looked at, that I've looked at, and a lot of others, there's kind of like this like sweet spot between 39 and 55%, 60% reduction in cost that you get from implementing a mostly green with cost-effective gray solution or an entirely green solution like Philadelphia is doing. And our program is going to cost around $706 million on gray infrastructure. We came up with that number in 2022 with the Stormwater Master Plan. Doesn't account for things like inflation and actually repaving every single road after we've increased all the pipe capacity. So I mean, that number probably is in the billions, probably 1.5 billion once you factor 20 years of implementation, and last year we had 10% inflation. So those numbers add up on massive programs like this. So why do we need an ordinance and a green infrastructure staff role? We're working on an ordinance with a couple city councilors right now. It's in the draft writing stage, and I think this is getting rolled out to a bunch of different departments for comments. I think that's what's supposed to happen this week. So if you haven't gotten it yet, we recommended Brandon send this to you guys too. The ordinance is modeled after Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon has the most successful Green Streets program nationally. And what it does is it really creates the infrastructure for a city to roll something like this out. But it really comes down to like someone needs ownership of it. So either a green infrastructure division, a green infrastructure staffer, or department head, someone that can like really talk about like all of the city projects that are happening and how to incorporate it. And the image on the bottom right portion of the screen is really kind of like, it really sums up like this connectability and like this synergy. So New York City plants does thousands of these green infrastructure tree basins, and they collect about 2,000 gallons per storm, like the one below. So when you get like a large rainfall event where you get 1 inch of rain, that's what their defining number was. They can take 2,000 gallons out of the storm system. And they've installed 11,000 of these, an absolute ton. And if we actually like changed our approach and maybe just did some of this, like we plant 300-400 trees a year, but the trees are all above the curb. So what this system allows is as it rains, the water goes in and then it collects in here, and then you don't have to, I mean, if you get enough rain events, you don't really have to drive around with the trucks and water the trees. So it allows the trees to get a better chance, and all of the native plants that are inside the bioretention basin also can thrive because now you're actually watering them with a significant amount of water every time it rains. But kind of like this connected approach of green infrastructure and looking at tree programs and really everything as stormwater infrastructure, that can get you can get more funding from that. There's all of these grants out for the infrastructure bill and ARPA, and there's a lot of money for this right now. And that connection between our pollinator space and our forestry program and our infrastructure with stormwater kind of allows you to collect a lot more money for the programs and maybe expand them. So it's definitely something to take a serious look at within all of the different groups in the city. And this staff position, like this sentence over here that's highlighted is probably the most important, because a lot of cities just don't do this on their own. Either the mayor forces it and mandates it, an ordinance is put in place, or EPA has what's called a consent order or a long-term control plan, which we are negotiating with EPA right now on CSO discharges. EPA will usually require a certain level of this, and they haven't yet. So what we're hoping to do is not require the federal government to force us to do something that is this huge positive for the community, and to really kind of like step in and say, we're just going to do it, and be very proactive about it. But there are barriers, and EPA has spent a lot of time working with municipalities to really kind of overcome these. And they've got a great website with a lot of fact sheets and a lot of case studies. But I think what's most important about it is, like, they've really committed to this program, and they've reaffirmed their commitment a lot of times over the last like 20 years. And they are fully like integrated with cities that want to do this. And as much so as they partner with the communities to adopt these solutions, they work with them to implement them. They have a template for a green long-term control plan. So like I said earlier, we're doing a new long-term control plan for our city's CSO discharges. They already have the infrastructure in place to switch gears if we want to. And it's on their website, and it can be downloaded, and it has the entire framework to actually do a program like that and switch from gray to green. But it's a choice. We have to choose what type of city we want to have, and this really is a choice. We can do a gray program. It works. Green works too. It's just a question of, do we want to do it? And do we have the staff capacity? I mean, that's a huge component within government. New York City putting 11,000 of these in the ground, that's a lot of work. We don't have to nearly do 11,000 of them, but we're a smaller city. But they use their DEP and a bunch of other departments to really kind of roll out this program effectively. So it's a team solution, and it's a collaborative solution within a lot of different groups within the city that really kind of need to come together and make a decision on whether they want to do it. So in summary, our bike networks can be built on permeable pavements. They can be part of our green infrastructure. They can get funded with green infrastructure. Our safety improvements, the same thing. We can expand our green space with green streets. We can plant more native plants and pollinators on green streets. We can have more space for trees. We could have better tree wells. There's actually, in one of their green streets guides, there's a great picture, and I should have put this in it. It's a street that has the same tree planted on both sides of a sidewalk. And one side of the sidewalk has proper subsurface conditions, and the other side doesn't. And the trees on the right side are twice the size as the trees on the left side that don't have enough room for the trees to grow. So it's really thinking holistically about our streets or sidewalks and our infrastructure and what we want to accomplish. And we got climate resiliency, urban heat island effects, reduced CSOs. Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell. We had another component was about a demonstration project in Gilman Square, and we could chat about that at another time. But really, this is like an overview of programmatically what Green Streets can accomplish.
Cool, thank you. And we've set aside, as we were planning out the meeting, probably another 15 minutes or so to do questions and conversations on whatever the committee and the attendees are curious about from the presentation. I'm totally glad that you came and showed us this. So, floor is open.
I can jump in if no one else is. This is great. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I think it's something that, you know, I don't need to be sold on. It's, as a landscape architect, this is a lot of the work that I'm doing out in the world. And so I think my question is how can we help support this initiative? I think your point that it needs people to make it happen in the city is spot on. And so you mentioned that you're drafting something to be reviewed by other city groups and the mayor. So how can we, as a group, we have no jurisdictional power, but we can write memos and offer support. So yeah, my question would be, how can we help support this and think about our piece in that branch that you showed of all the different organizations. That was also really, really helpful, and I'm so glad you've thought about all the different ways that this ties together so many different departments and groups within the city that are already thinking about these things.
I mean, I probably missed a couple too. Like, I think we have a sustainability department, and I don't even have them on the list because I don't work in the city. So I guess who should be the contact that I forget what Brendan's last name is, but he's the city council's ordinance
Salisbury.
writer. Yeah.
Brendan Salisbury.
So he has this now. We took a first shot at modifying the Portland ordinance towards like Somerville, but what we really need is like, it's still draft. You know what I mean? Like other input from your group, especially into the language in the document. What else you would want to see in it? There's rules about if, say, it's a street that doesn't get green infrastructure, like money will go into a green infrastructure fund. And I think how that's distributed is something that's completely, like, it's like the next step to figuring out what happens with it. Offsite mitigation projects, all of those things, like we have them in the ordinance, but they're not defined yet. And maybe there's other things within the ordinance that your group would like to have in it. I think we exclude tree planting from a requirement for it, but maybe there's a percentage of trees that get planted as green infrastructure that becomes a requirement. So I'm not sure if it's your entire committee that wants to take a look at it or if there's a point person, but if you can direct me to who the point person is, I can send that to Brandon, and he can make sure that your team is involved. Then on the other side of it, we have presented a version of this to the mayor, and she was very responsive to it. I think she just wants to make sure that there's broad support around the city for implementing something like this, and that it's just not coming from like a small group of residents. So any support that you guys have that you want to let her know that, like, hey, you saw the presentation and you think it's something that could be great for the city, that would be really effective too.
And when people are writing that kind of support, it helps to to give them a couple of phrases too, so it's all recognizably pointing in the same direction. And it sounds like it's green streets and green infrastructure are the things that people are in favor of.
Yeah, absolutely. Green streets in particular, because that will be in line with the ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
And green infrastructure can happen everywhere, but like that comes down to like building code requirements, and when developers come in, like making them put a green roof in. Like we don't do a whole lot of those, but like that's the other component. It's making sure that we're not putting more water into the system and that we're taking some water out of the system, because all of this, when we get a big rain event, goes into the Mystic, into the Alewife, and then the other half of it kind of comes up through the sewer pipes and floods people's basements. So.
Other thoughts and questions?
I'm wondering if you can share this presentation with us as well, or some of those links. I'd like to dig in a little bit more about the myth busting and stuff. My mind always goes to specific challenges, so I'm wondering, like, since I'm the tree planter of the city, we do have extremely narrow sidewalks, much narrower than New York City. I don't know about Philadelphia, but pretty much the narrowest I've ever seen, so probably up there. And often I'm planting trees where I make the tree pit as wide as I possibly can, and there's not a lot of, if I had to make it wider, I couldn't plant a tree there. So I'm wondering like what the minimum dimensions are for the tree green infrastructure in particular, or if, you know, it's really in the weeds, so we don't have to get into it now, but I'd love to be able to read up more about that.
Yeah, I could point you to some great documents for that. New York City even has like a tree diagram, and Boston, if you go to City Hall Plaza, they just redid the entire thing. It's green infrastructure. So they only have about a 1 foot by 1 foot opening around the tree because the entire area around the tree is built for the tree, and then they put permeable pavements on top of it. So the amount of space needed for the opening is smaller, but the amount of suitable space for the tree roots to grow is substantially larger. And yeah, there's the last page of this. So I got grants, links, and then all the references are over here. If you can still see my screen, or they're on the previous pages. But send me an email if what you're looking for isn't in there, and I've been through all of these design guides, and I could probably find it for you faster than you needing to waste a ton of time.
Thanks.
I have a question. So I used to work for the Parks Department in New York City. And I wasn't involved in the bioswales, but they used to steal planting spaces from me from time to time. So I was very aware of them. And they looked really cool, and I love the idea, but anecdotally, the trees didn't look like they were doing very well in a lot of cases. So I'm just curious if you have any statistics, or if the EPA has any statistics on tree survivorship or anything like that in these bioretention basins and bioswales and things like that.
I do not. That would be a really good question. Our EPA administrator, Todd Borchi, has been super helpful. He like passes me like who's doing green infrastructure notes like weekly almost. I'm sure he can might be able to help with that. They also have a website called it's called GIWiz, like GWiz, and they developed it so that they can aggregate like the thousands of articles that they have on their website, so that you could type who you are if you're a planner or city person and what you're looking for, and it will search the database for different articles about stuff.
You said giwiz.com?
Yeah, or just Google search EPA GIWiz, Green Infrastructure Wizard.
Cool. Check it out.
Yeah, are you guys having a lot of trouble with plant success rates for trees here too?
I wouldn't say a lot. It depends on, we don't have all the data compiled, although Chris has expressed some interest in doing that. Just anecdotally, like some trees don't make it, but most do. Maybe they won't. Yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to have a specific number.
Yeah.
Breck hasn't seen a full cycle, so I don't know if he can compare.
Yeah, I would think that drought conditions or whatever the year might have something to do with it, or I don't know, some nurseries are just different than others, or
Yeah.
maybe what they're planting just didn't work.
One of the challenges that we had was it's funny how you pull any particular thread in the city and you get the whole sweater. In this case, it came back to the staffing challenges in DPW, where because the tree warden had to operate on basically an only hazardous, only urgent removal basis, because we were putting out contracts, there was a backlog of trees that needed to be removed, but they weren't yet hazardous. And so we lost a bit of resolution on what was failing in any particular time period, where ideally the crew would go around, verify they're dead, remove it, and we would just say we would know exactly when it died. But yeah, I'm hoping to collate what data we have. And if anybody didn't see that, I think it was a Cambridge Day article about their tree failure rate. It was kind of shocking. I have not yet seen a response from the city staff. That was an independent study, but they reported a really shocking failure rate in tree plantings. I would be surprised if we were that high.
Yeah.
And then yeah, that would be like the denominator and then you put them in bioswales and you say, are we like above or below 1? But don't know.
I mean, it could be a really great paper.
Mhm.
Also, just looking at the Somerville Ave Saucy project trees, some of those are in bioswales or tree trenches, and they're all looking great. So that's our 30 or 50 tree sample size for now.
So I guess
Is
the one
there-
kind of take, oh, sorry.
Go for it.
I was going to say that the takeaway from an approach like this is like Somerville Ave was this massive project. A lot of tanks, a lot of infrastructure. I think it was what, 65 or $100 million. You don't need to do that for like most of this. Like this could just be like the corner of your street and you could put one in. It doesn't have to be involved in like a major road retrofit project. It could be involved in like when they're just repaving the street, like not when they're redoing everything. Like the real benefit to this is to not have to rip up the entire street to change your entire stormwater infrastructure. It's to manage most of it at the source before it even gets in. So
I'm curious how this is aligned with the Spring Hill sewer separation, where there is proposed bump outs. We basically like have the plan to roll this out, and I'm curious how aligned. If we look at what you're proposing, I think it's pretty in line with what we're doing already. So I think the question is like, where's the what can we learn from this initiative, and is it about supporting what's already in place?
well, so that is a sewer project with some green infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a green infrastructure project instead of a sewer project.
Right.
So you would evaluate the street for everything you could do first. And then if you can't do that, then you would go in and rip up all the pipes. So in Philadelphia, they don't do the sewer like upgrade projects. They just don't do them at all. They wind up saving $6.5 billion by not doing the projects like the Spring Hill separation project. They're doing a ton more green infrastructure sites. So it's that trade of you don't need to increase your pipe sizes if you can remove the excess water from getting into them. So, and that's really what the ordinance focuses on. The ordinance focuses on green first, not last, and like we're doing like token green.
Yeah,
Yep.
I would just add from my perspective that this is something like I'm a systems person, and it turns out there's just the one street and it has to serve all of these different needs. Right? But when it showed on your chart, and there's like 2 more departments that I would throw on the chart. Like engineering has to design it, and I forget what the other one was, but we tend to like when engineering gets a sewer project, they do a sewer project, and that's not necessarily a trees project. And when the bike network gets designed, that's not necessarily a green project, nor is it a sewer project. And you do Vision Zero and you want bump outs, and you're still not calling Vanessa to say, what can we do with these bump outs? Nor are you calling the native planting coordinator, the pollinator coordinator. And the idea of a holistic approach where you put, for me, I put safety first, and then I put sort of sustainable integrative things like green after that. But yeah, it is an uphill push across the way that we currently organize and think. And I'm thrilled to see it. I'm thrilled to see this coming together in Somerville. I'm completely supportive of the idea. And and you are either choosing to be very gentle. I suspect you're choosing to be gentle about the reaction that I can already hear from some corners, that this is just going to be another drain on the parking that's available on the city. And I saw in your pictures that there's like consideration for it, but it all comes together on the streets, and it's super, I feel like it's super important to take an integrated and a top-down vision approach.
Thank you.
I think I interrupted Jennifer.
Oh, that's okay. I completely agree with what you're saying. I was thinking that same thing. And the other thing I was thinking was push back on cost. I know that especially if we can kind of commit and work across committees and across groups to formulate this cohesive, integrated plan, to put forward. I think this idea of green infrastructure is just, totally up our alley here, right? It's just, and I'm just super excited you're here to talk to us about it. My understanding from your presentation is that the more integrated the approach, the better chances are to get the funding to actually do this project. What I'm wondering is, what are costs after that? Like from the case studies from Lancaster or Philadelphia or New York, what are costs of maintenance on, or what does it take to maintain such an infrastructure?
Yeah,
Is
so
there
those
any
costs are
idea of that?
included.
Okay.
Yeah, so all of them did life cycle cost analysis for the projects compared to both. So the numbers that they came up with there is included maintenance on them. And that maintenance can also be considered a bonus too, because now you have green jobs, which are not high skilled labor. They can be people in, if you're going to build an underground storage tank that's like 50 feet deep, you're hiring like a specialty contractor. And that's a different type of like skill set. But if you're doing green infrastructure, those green jobs, that's like anybody. That's people in communities that can now get really great city jobs that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that before. So there's the maintenance, but then there's also like the economic advantages that you give to the residents by allowing creation of those jobs. But yeah, I mean, it's trees, it's plantings. Like you have to make sure that the water can get into them. So there is maintenance, but the trade-off in terms of cost, like if you're going to save like $400 million, you could do the maintenance for 100 or 200 years, and it's not going to break the bank.
Right, right. And an important maybe statement or two to include in that, for people who, like me, who kind of starts thinking about that.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people think about. Like right on the EPA's website is they have an entire page dedicated to the maintenance costs, and like it is a perception. Like we live in a society where we want to do something and then like it's done. But I mean, if you want to have
Yeah.
something that's great, you kind of need to work at it
Yeah,
and keep it
totally.
great.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I like your use of the word perception. I think that's perfect here, right? Yeah, I like that.
yeah.
Hi, it's Tori. You don't have to disclose anything if you don't want to, but do you feel like that there might be a possibility for some of this sort of what I feel is like tanks need to go everywhere under all these buildings and park, we just gotta, this is the way. We need bigger culverts and, we need to separate our sewer. And I guess that's something we have to do, but there's a lot of tanks that are being planned to put in. Is this at all, did the mayor give any indication or any hope that maybe this could be a way to not have to do these things?
I mean, I think that the main component of this really is we have a tank and gray infrastructure master plan that does not include any green infrastructure.
Really?
And we don't have a green infrastructure plan that has some cost-effective gray solutions that can be used as an alternative. The tanks don't necessarily need to be there. Portland had a project where they had this $180 million tank, and then they did mostly green infrastructure and a little bit of pipe reworking, and they wound up saving $70 million. And they got like 50 amazing green infrastructure projects out of it. So there is balance, but right now the balance is we're doing gray.
Yeah.
We're putting enough green in to make it seem like we're doing it, but we're not fully integrated. I mean, Portland, Oregon also has EPA support, and they have requirements from the EPA to achieve these things. And we don't yet. And we might have that in 3 years. I mean, I think that's the hope. I think EPA is solidly on our side. The conversations that I've had with them, they say every option is on the table, including green. And, you know, it's really the question of EPA is different regions. We're in region 1, Portland's in region 10, Philadelphia is in region 2, so is New York City. Different regions operate differently. Boston has a consent order that requires them to do green infrastructure now, but they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it at all. And then EPA made them do it. They did 3 amazing projects, and now they've got a green infrastructure department. And they're really kind of like taking this to the next level. Watertown's doing green infrastructure. George Varoufakis has a program over there now. Watertown's like surprisingly leading the area in green infrastructure. And they've been doing it for like 10 or 15 years now. And like, this is achievable. And they're probably doing it because they have less money than we do. Like, we have a lot of tax revenue. Watertown doesn't. Green infrastructure costs less money. And sometimes you got to be scrappy, and you need to figure out how you're going to not get sued by the EPA for Clean Water Act violations. And green infrastructure really is a great option for it.
Well, this is exciting. Yeah. Would you be able to send us over the draft of the ordinance? Would you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I told Brendan to send it to Vanessa. She was CC'd on the. Who's Vanessa on the list? I don't. That's
I am,
you.
but I don't.
Okay.
I have not seen anything, so maybe he spelled my name wrong.
He just might not be there yet. Like, it took him like 2 weeks to like respond to the initial email, and then he said he was going to get on it this week. And this week isn't over yet, so I'll remind him to pass it on. But yeah, the draft is there. I could send a copy of the language with the presentation, and all the links are in the presentation. They should be fine for you to click on them. I think they all work. And I've got even more information, and it's so much information on the EPA website too. Like, it's really impressive the amount of work that EPA put into really trying to convince engineering departments to do this and cities to do it. Like, they've been really leading this uphill battle for 30 years.
Yeah, that sparks a thought for me. In my day job, I am in IT, and one of the hallmarks of being a service center, of being a cost center in an organization, is that you want to be really sure that you do the job that the organization needs you to do, and not just make stuff up and spend money because you feel like it.
Yeah.
Right? And I can totally, and with some of these departments, it is right there in the name what they're supposed to talk about, like the water and sewer department. Like, and it is a totally sideways way of thinking, and it's a very wholesome and correct way of thinking to say, no, it's like a complete street, a green street manages all of these factors, but we're coming into it, and you see it in the meetings you have to have with these various named departments, where it's like, now we're going to deal with facilities. Now we're going to deal with the parks that are totally not the trees in the street, because that's a different thing. So yeah, I appreciate the work and the push, and I feel like I'm hearing a lot of support from the committee. So when it comes around time for I hear several of us are interested in looking at drafts and stuff and slides, and then when it comes time that it would be appropriate to write a memo from the committee, just let us know. And I feel like there's a lot of support here.
Yeah, I mean, that would be absolutely incredible. So I'll send you guys over the information, and you'll have my email. So if there's any other questions that you have, or if you have a question about how other cities are doing things, I've literally just been researching it. And a side note, just to put a disclaimer, I work for the company that was the asset manager for Philadelphia. So I do have, so Philadelphia, they did their program, their asset management division was run by the Cambridge CDM Smith company. And that's how they were able to kind of like, it's these massive programs. Sometimes they hire consultants to do work. So there is almost every single thing in the report has a reference to it. So you can fact check all of the numbers.
Very
I'm
cool.
just excited about being called scrappy.
Awesome. So if there's no more new questions, thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate your making the time to come out. Felt like it was a really healthy conversation, and you've got a lot of interest and support that I'm hearing from us. So thank you. Oh, hello, Kat.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys letting me babble for 25 minutes.
You came to the right place. All right, so I'm going to show the agenda again, and I believe we were on spring tree planting.
Back to me.
Back to you. Always does seem to come back.
It does. There's a lot of me in this meeting. Spring tree planting. Spring is coming up, and the invitation for bids was put out yesterday. So we are reaching out for a contract. It's going to be posted for 3 weeks, so it closes on March 3rd, and no, March 9th. So then at that point, we'll know who we've got. And in the meantime, we're going to start scouting sites. The goal is to plant 175 trees. If you know of any specific sites, I do have a lot of requests and things already in my mind, but if anyone has any particular tree planting desires, please let me know.
Hi, Vanessa.
Right.
I mentioned this earlier, but Symphony Park, adding a new tree to replace that big one that was cut down, is that an option for spring
So we
plant?
actually we transplanted 2 hickories that were on the side of the park, and it was a little too dense. We transplanted 2 or 3 into that sort of central area around where the stump is, where the now sculpture. So we're going to see how those do, and if they don't make it for any reason, hickories are a bit tough to transplant. Then I can definitely put in something else. We wanted to try to save some of those hickories that were planted really densely. So that's what's happening there at the moment.
Okay, great.
And I see a question from Crystal in the chat. How long a site needs to be fallow after a tree is taken out before we can replant?
So it depends, as everything. Potentially no time, but if the stump was really, really huge, actually not even that huge. If it was moderately sized or very large, then they don't grind the full stump out. If they can't pull it out, then they don't grind it right now. So I would look to shift a new tree location from where the stump was / is. And if that's not possible, then I can think about doing some grinding. It's really hard to grind down deep enough to get a tree ball in. We have done it, so it's possible. But ideally, I would wait like 5-ish years for the stump to get some good decomposition in there.
I'm thinking of the tree that's down Elm Street that had to be taken out in the fall due to disease.
Yeah.
And the stump is huge and the pit is huge. And I am wondering if the city's plan is to reuse it or to move to a different location for the next street tree that's near there.
Probably move. I can't remember if there's room on the other side of that property. That would be like goal number 1. That stump is still there too. I just saw it yesterday. So, well, I know they're not going to pull it out, so it doesn't really matter. I'd have to look at the site to see if I can shift it so at least the root ball isn't right over the stump, or if I can shift it to the other side of the property. Even in front of your place, they ended up having to plant the tree shifted a little bit from the center of the well because there's an old stump there. So.
That was like many years ago.
It takes a
many
long time
housemates ago.
When it's covered in cement, it may not go very fast. And I think it was also unexpected, so they didn't have all the right equipment there on the day.
I see another question in the chat about potential plantings on Hunter Gates's street.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Ash Ave, Winter Hill. And I spoke to someone, I don't know if it was you, it was several years ago, someone was out, I saw them with a clipboard looking at trees, and I ran up to them very quickly and said, "Hi, I want to be your friend." But as they were there surveying to see where they could, like measuring to see where if they could put trees in. And at that point, it was a no-go for the side of the street that doesn't have the power lines above it. They put some in on the side of the street, the odd side, the south side, that does have power lines over it, which doesn't work very well. So I was wondering if there's been any change in tree technology or anything that would allow it to maybe fit in a relatively small sidewalk.
No, if that was the issue, that the sidewalk was too narrow, we still have to leave ADA accessibility of 3 feet wide sidewalks, and our tree pits need to be like 3 foot wide. If it's like a 5.5 foot, I might be able to squeeze in a slightly narrower well, but I can't recall what the width is on Ash Ave.
Not much. The street's tiny and the sidewalks are even tinier, but
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I just wanted to check in since it's been a few years.
Thanks.
And I will share that there's a whole conversation in the city around the fact that if you want an extra 6 to 8 feet of usable space and there's parking there, then that's a conversation that's possible to have, but it's a pretty fiery conversation. If my experience has been, if there's a block or a street that is in pretty unanimous agreement that there's tons and tons of space, we don't need parking, you can make an argument for a bump out, and it's the kind of thing that can happen, but it's rare. Like,
definitely not happening on my street, especially not next to an elementary school that's under construction with no parking for the teachers and so forth. So yeah,
it's a good idea. It always comes up in conversation, and it's challenging in the details.
I had a question, Torian. So on Vinyl Street at the bottom of where Vinyl meets Summer, a tree, I think that was under warranty, was hit and is not there anymore. And I was wondering, is that tree going to be replaced? And then I just thought, do trees that get replaced count towards the 175 new trees for each year? So I guess and the third part is that if that could be a good location for a tree pilot project. So there's 3 questions in there.
So yes, I remember that tree, and it is under warranty. There's a bunch of warranty replacements that need to happen this spring. Warranty trees do not count towards my 175 tree plantings. They count in previous seasons. It does make following survival complicated for Chris One's future analysis. And for pilot, I can't remember how wide that sidewalk is, but remember we need to keep it really quite clear. So it needs to be a like 8 foot wide sidewalk so that there's still 5 feet wide of space, given that the branching is going to be lower than some of my other trees. And I remember that spot, I was a little bit hesitant about planting there, but really wanted to get one in because it's really close to the gate to Nunziato. So I would be hesitant of making it much bigger. I don't know if that matters, but the low branching, and I think the sidewalk's too narrow for our pilot trees.
Okay, but it'll be replanted, so that's
Yep.
good news. Oh, and the other question I had, like, how long do 311 records go back? Because I've met people and they said, yeah, I put in a request for a tree like 2 years ago and still haven't gotten it. And it's like, I don't think it's exactly how that, how that works. So do you have a record of when people like
I keep them all in a separate spreadsheet. Most of them I close out right away, but some come in at like odd times. And you know, then they don't get addressed. And sometimes they're complicated and I need to figure out whose property it is or something to fix. So there's some on Broadway that I think that I remember being open for a few years, but it's probably DCR property and no one can confirm. So they sort of sit in limbo. But generally I try to cycle through and plant or not plant, you know, everyone who's made a request in the prior season. I am not very fast about closing stuff out, so it's possible that there's a request that I've actually already assessed and there's a reason that I can't plant there, but I haven't told them yet. So it's in my spreadsheet, but not in 301. So.
Well, thanks for doing that, having that spreadsheet.
Sure.
Just trying to think off the top of my head if I know of any, or if there is any sort of outreach to do, like, oh, let 311 know, like, if you want a tree near your wherever. But I don't want to set up the expectations and then have people be disappointed. I don't know. So I guess another question is, how can we help you at all find spots, or is there anything we can do to help you?
I think just if you like notice a spot that looks good or a street, let me know, but you don't need to spend extra effort doing that. I do have a backlog of requests and I'm trying to focus a little bit more on completing some of the goals from the urban forest management plan of planting in more of the areas that really need it. So I have been always catching up on 311 requests and don't want to ignore people's requests that come in, and thus haven't had that much extra tree availability to focus on those areas. But I've got plenty of places to plant, plenty of ideas. So you know, if you know where one would be well loved or is really needed, let me know. Or you just want one, you know, near your street, definitely happy to look at those. But I don't necessarily need a bunch of requests.
All right. So next up, if we're okay with planting, and usually at this point we ask about the species list. Did we back channel that, or are we just not going to ask about the species list this year?
Well, it's too soon because I don't know who my contractor is or what species they might have available. So we'll circle back to that at another meeting.
Cool. We are always interested in species lists.
Yep.
All right. And then next up is Quincy Street Open Space.
Me again. Hi. All right. So I talked to Courtney and got answers to the questions. You remember a few months ago, Tori started a question list and we refined it in the meeting. So I'm gonna sort of go through and talk about what I learned and share that information with you. I'm gonna sort of maybe answer the questions a little bit out of order. So first off, I'm gonna answer what parks are in the purview of the horticulturalist. So you have that in mind. So we have Quincy Street Open Space, Symphony Park, Chucky Harris, Luann David, Lincoln Park, parts of it, and Hoyt Sullivan. So it's a lot. It's pretty much all the parks that have like difficult plant plans that are more not just like a single species, things that are need a little bit extra touch. And all of these parks were assessed at one point when this program was developed, the horticultural program, to try to figure out a work plan for the horticulturalist to do. So So as the starting point for developing a work plan, the planting plan was used. And I know we've talked a lot in here about thinking about these landscapes as dynamic and not static, but we needed to have something to put in writing to have someone respond to, right? So starting point was developing a plan based on the plants that were originally planted there. And someone with horticultural knowledge helped devise this work plan using the plants on the list and devising a schedule of when those plants should be maintained, like what should happen to those plants when. And so they came up with a 5 touch points throughout the year plan. So there's 5 visits throughout the year: early spring, early summer, mid to late summer, and early fall. And each of those time points have a list of different things that the horticulturalist is supposed to work on. And in addition, at each visit, the horticulturalist is tasked with hand weeding all weeds based on the noxious weed list that Amy is working on, and picking up trash. So those are the basic tasks for each park. So the first full year of work with this program was last year. And there's some development going on as the program progresses, because we need to have some actual data of what's actually there and what's actually changing season by season. So this is sort of a work in progress. But right now, Pemberton is the horticulturalist doing the work, and they've been doing a great job, according to PSUF. So,
sorry, just to clarify, is that the name of a person, or?
Oh, I believe it's like a company, Pemberton Farms, I think is like, it's related to Pemberton Farms.
Pemberton, like the store?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe.
Thank you.
So that sort of details like how the project got started and what the instructions were for maintaining all the parks, and then each park, you know, was a little bit separate just based on what plants were in the planting plan. So specifically for Quincy also, there was directive that like native plants that weren't weeds, keep them in place if they pop up, as long as the location doesn't conflict with safety. There is a lot of concern from people not being able to see to the back of the park, especially that back corner where there's like the seating area. And if people from the street or people who are interested in going into the park can't see back there, they get a little creeped out. It's just like in the dark, you don't know who's back there, and you can't, there's only one entrance and exit point, so it's just a safety concern. Okay, so another question was, what's the plan for revegetation of Quincy Street? So there is the beginnings of a plant list. It will be 100% native, and it's pretty much all herbaceous things to fill in the understory. Once they have developed like an actual full list, I'll be sure to share that with you before it's finalized, so that UFC can comment. But the hope is to get some more plants in there this year sometime, more likely the fall than the spring. And part of the plan for revegetation will include a plant establishment fence and a dog relief area, because the horticulturalists have noticed that there is a lot of dog waste in the park and that plants can't survive through that. So that answers a lot of the questions. There's also a question about how can the UFC be supportive in respecting these spaces? What is the outreach and how can UFC help? Right now, there's no real direct outreach about this program or anything. It's just, maintaining the park. they go in for half a day or a day at a time, and 5 times a year and do maintenance. So not really sure how UFC can be of help. Maybe some signs could be made about like not having dogs pee on plants or something. I mentioned also the puppy pee station that Renee's brought up before. So maybe this is a good spot for that. So I'm going to share that information with Courtney to start mulling that over. There's also rabbits, I guess, in the park. So there's some hope that putting up a plant establishment fence might help with this, but that doesn't really get to outreach. So kind of don't know how UFC can help, but you can internalize this information and see if any great ideas come in. And I did ask about like what residents nearby would like to see, and there hasn't been a lot of outreach directly to the neighbors, so it's hard to know. Some things get pulled up randomly, and I noticed we all noticed some of the trees that we planted at some Arbor Day events have gotten topped, but we don't know who's doing it or why. People have mentioned before that security is important, like I just talked about, but other than that, we don't really know what's going on. I think the plant that you have discussed before as being very pervasive in the park and then was gone is what's it called? Snake root. Is that the one that you guys mentioned before, Amy and Tori?
Well, yeah, that was one that was pervasive and is, hard to kill unless you're like out there with, it's a native plant, but it's just aggressive. And the other one was bouncing bet. So
bouncing bet. I can look through the bouncing bet. I can look through and see if there's any specific mention of the bouncing bet in their reports, but I did notice, and Courtney mentioned that snake root they did pull intentionally. They didn't use any chemicals, but it was pulled out because of its aggressiveness. It was really choking out some of the other plants and just would take over the entire park. It was just a targeted effort to pull those at the right times of year and continually pull them, the 5 times that they go per year. So that's how I guess they've made a big impact with continually pulling that. I don't know about the bouncing bet.
And bouncing bet needs to go straight up. Milkweed too. See you, Amy, in the comments.
So I know they've left some milkweed, at least some of it, but some of the other milkweed was growing too tall and was becoming a security issue. They are, they've noticed like a lot of plants that aren't on the original plant list, like milkweed and something else, some other stuff, and they're leaving it where it's not a safety issue, or at least trying to cut it. Maybe sometimes they're leaving it but cutting it back so that there's good visibility, and they're trying to manage it, not remove it, but it really depends on where exactly in the park it is.
I mean, thank you for this. I'm really curious. So I'm curious to know what they do at each location for each time of the year. Because I
can share the contract with you, and I can share my screen and show you an example of what they're.
Sure. If you can do Quincy, just because that's what I'm the most familiar with, unless someone else prefers another.
It's just showing my whole screen. Can you see this?
Yep.
We can just see the document. It's just your browser, or just Adobe.
Oh, just in a good way. You're seeing the Adobe file I want to show you. Okay, great.
I'm not seeing anything other than the document.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is like the task list. You can see like handweed, dead cut. They list specific species. Let me scroll down here to Quincy. So pruning shrubs in the early spring, cutting stuff back in the, is this summer? Sorry.
Yeah, so
spring,
just,
early,
just
so
it's on,
starts in summer.
where's the summer? It starts in summer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just zoom in.
I don't know how to show the seasons and the Quincy at the
Yeah.
same time.
So I don't know in summer why you're pruning shrubs unless something's dead. I mean, just want to look at like cutbacks. Like, how do we say, like, if you want to do cutbacks, like, I don't know, leave half, you know, do cutbacks, but don't cut back all the way to the end in certain foliage, or not cut back at all. I mean, reduce height of the blue star to flowering.
I don't think they're cutting back the shrubs all the way to the ground or anything.
No, I know. It's just like certain I just wouldn't do prune. I do pruning year round. I'll do it if something's dead, but then there's certain plants you prune right after they flower, but then you know, most things get pruned. Could you go down just a little bit?
Absolutely.
We'll just stick to the Quincy Street.
So while you're reading that, I think this is super helpful to see and just get a sense of what the horticulture has been tasked to do. And now that I'm going to jump to some probably severe conclusions, but if it is the Pemberton like horticultural team, it seems like the setup is really that they're coming in 5 times a year and completing these tasks. But if I'm going to make an assumption based on what we've seen throughout the past year, that's sort of the end of their contract. And if it is sort of this company coming in and doing these tasks, I think some of us might have had a vision that this person is going to come in and be super passionate about growing and evolving these spaces. And it seems like that's not the position that is currently filled. I'm not sure if that seems super off base. It might, but I'm just sort of making a guess. And I'm wondering if the next time we put out an RFP for this position, we include, I don't know, I think we were, or I'll speak for myself and not others. I think I was excited about or had a vision of someone who would get super invested in these spaces and want to sort of grow and evolve them and plant new things and try new things and be in conversation with us. And it seems like if we got, you know, someone who has probably a full-time job on top of this, it's probably not the top of their priority or passion list. And so I think a lot of this is starting to make sense of where we're at. And I think I haven't gone to these places, so I can't attest to whether all of these things have been done specifically, but I can assume that they have. And so I wonder if the next time we put out this call for this position, if we can instill it with either that expectation that they consult with our team, or I'm trying to think of another way to make it a position that we can collaborate with and probably learn. You know, I think in our ideal world, we'd learn from each other. We'd work on the small tree pilot program and the planting pits and sort of share expertise and learn from each other. And that might be an optimistic future view, but I think that might be what was in my head when we started talking about this contract and this work.
What can I respond to that?
Yes.
It's usually one person who is coming multiple times, and they are invested in the parks looking nice and not leaving it static. But you have to write a contract, right, where you have to tell someone what you are expecting, and then you go and there's reality differs from expectations, right? So this is just the like bare bones skeleton guide of what we're expecting, and there's always discussion between this company or this person and Courtney, who's managing this, to make sure that everyone's goals are aligned. There's a full report of what they did and what they think would be good to work on going forward, just to like keep it dynamic. But there is no part of the contract that includes planting. So however invested they are, they're not going to spend their own money and time and effort to go plant in a park. That's just not part of the contract and not how we envisioned it. And there are challenges with the city where we get big money to revamp a whole park. We rebuild a park. There is no money or anything to do updates. So Quincy Street didn't quite work as it was planned. There was a lot of shrubs put in, and like the idea was to let it go kind of wild, but like it's gone a little too wild maybe, and there were too many weeds and there's a lot of dogs and things aren't working. So now we need to make little tweaks maybe to that park to make it, the dream park that it can be. And that's why we're working with DPW, and Courtney's developing a plant list with another person to see let's try again, right? But that's sort of a separate process from this horticulturalist contract that's trying to maintain what we intended to design and like, yes, improve it as it goes, help the plants grow to their full potential. There might be holes where plants just didn't work like we thought. And then we need another piece of the puzzle to fit into where there are holes or where things need to be thought about differently. But I don't see any indication of why we should not want this company to continue doing what they're doing. The city's been really happy with it. They're doing, a lot of detailed work. They're providing reports so we know what's going on. It was a 1-year contract with the option to renew for 3 years, for 2 additional years, for 3 years total. So we have Pemberton for 2 more years. That's already done. And I don't think anyone in the city has qualms about the work that they're doing. The way that Quincy Park is turning out is not maybe the vision that anyone had. And that's why we're doing the plans to make it something better.
No, that's great to hear, and be reminded that planting new plants is not part of this contract. And that is filling a mental gap in my mind. So yeah, I think all the pieces have sort of come together, and I have a clear vision of like what this program was set out to be. And now I think, we can start to envision creative ways to say, yeah, like, do we do these specific projects where they get a revamp when, something didn't work because of environmental conditions or dogs or what have you. So I think that's a takeaway from this is like, all right, so if we identify places in parks where we see, or tree pits or things like that, where we see opportunities for small scale planting projects, is that something we could aggregate and then go to the city and say, in 2022, we want to, or 2024, whatever, in addition to the street tree planting, like we also have ideas for how we could fit 2,000 perennials, and we've like charted out a course of like these places where these could fit. I don't know. I'll stop talking, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So one thing that thanks so much for this work. I know we've been asking in general for a long time, and asking specific questions helped. So this, Pemberton is sort of they have a fine landscaping service. It's very commercial. Like, it has the look people want, right? Like, make sure, you cut you don't cut back the foliage until it's like dead and brown. Like, no, you don't cut back the foliage. You just leave it. It dies. It turns into soil. Like this is not ecological landscaping. And that's for me, that's the pinnacle, right? Like just an ecological landscaping does not need to be messy. It can be neat. You just don't do any of these sort of hard cutbacks and like you leave the seed heads on. And I mean, unless you're being very careful, you don't want X plant to spread out of control. Like you make sure you leave the leaves. You know when to do the pruning. You're not like, it seems like people who know how to make things look neat. And I know there are good people there because I've used to use them as one of my still use them as when in a pinch for plants. A lot of good people, but it's kind of still this old sort of landscaping philosophy, like what you do at certain times of the year, and like cutbacks are a big part of that. And the reason you don't do cutbacks in terms of like cutting down stubble or cutting off foliage ecologically is that that's where bees make their homes in, and that's how they reproduce. And dead foliage provides that little bit of safety for overwintering moths and butterflies. And it's like, it's definitely an upgrade, but I mean, if they're doing, I would just love to, if Courtney is willing to let me take a look, I have a chat with her. It's just so many of us are still stuck on sort of a style, and or I mean, just I would love to see this pushed, especially at Quincy Street, where there's an opportunity to really do ecological landscaping and to have this sort of decent size area for the leaves to be left and the seed heads to be left and things to look nice. Like that would be an area that ecological landscaping can be practiced. I mean, you see in front of City Hall, people might think it looks like crap. I think it's a beautiful winter interest. I don't go and I'll cut that back. I'll cut it back and maybe have it look a little neater in May, maybe. But until then, you just sort of, I don't know if anyone has gone to at City Hall. There's a lot of, mostly right now it's switchgrass. I need to thin that out, but everything's left standing. So, and I'm not saying if something if it's a matter of sightline or if it's a matter of wanting to being able to see in the back. I'm not speaking about that, but just in terms of like leaving the stubble and the leaves and not cutting back your foliage and knowing when to trim your vines and shrubs. And usually the middle of summer is not that time. So I'd love to have another look if Courtney's willing to meet, and if that's something.
I think this sounds, and I second Leigh's comment that I feel like I understand what's going on now, like in a way that I didn't before, where we were talking about a horticulturalist contract, and I thought that was a particular kind of professional services. And what we've got is a specialized landscape maintenance contract, right? And it is so vastly more fine controlled than the grounds crews, for example. Like we've just got an amazing level of control there with people who can, as part of their training and specialty, they know the difference between the species and they'll do these different services. With that, I agree with you, Tori. We have an opportunity to fine tune what we ask them to do. And it's in part of the park design. Like, and I totally sympathize with the fact that the Quincy plan, like, it looked great. It didn't work out as expected. And so we need to circle back. Like, I'm thinking, move the bench. Like, the bench is not working, it's scaring people. But I think it would be amazing, Tori, if you're willing to see if we could converge to like the standards that this committee would like to see, you know, as the preferred, you know, if there's no other constraints, this is what we would love to see. And when there are other constraints, we have to bow to reality of sightlines and safety and whatever else. I think that'd be a great thing to start with some one-on-one conversations and then probably converge to some level of guidance where it's like, when we have a specialist coming in to do the maintenance, what do we ask them to do? I feel like that would be a real useful thing.
And I see that Hunter added in the chat, seconding Tori, and that Pemberton does not appear to have a permaculturalist, which is an important distinction between horticulturalist and permaculturalist. And that's a great observation.
But could I suggest that we, and I'm open to conversation about this, and we can even take it offline. I feel like we're good on what happened to Quincy Street and how this contract works. And I would love to have something ongoing on the agenda supporting, if it stays sufficiently within our mandate, recommended maintenance standards around like ideal best practice, and then conditions where we all agree, yeah, we can't have everything. I feel like that'd be a great use of this committee's time. All right. Well, cool. I'm looking at the clock a little bit, and would it be okay if we close this one out? I also really, really appreciate just the diligence of, I feel like this was super useful. I learned a lot. All right. I took the liberty of skimming the job postings that are on the city website during the meeting, because I'd forgotten to do that before, and I don't see anything terribly relevant to our interests currently on the job openings.
Well, I saw at the DPW, they have a few, what they called heavy workers. And still in the job description is, mowing lawns and planting trees and trimmings, shrubs, and anyone who wants to get, of course, it's also lining fields, doing sidewalks, it's your traditional bit of everything that our DPW crews do. But parks maintenance was scattered in there. And then it was just the RFP for the tree planting. And I think that was it. Hey, Vanessa, is the RFP for Prospect Hill gone out? I have not seen it. I've been keeping my eye out for it.
What RFP for Prospect Hill?
Oh, because I imagine you're going to do the installation in the spring for the Prospect Hill wedding.
I think it's just using DPW's contract to get plans, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This is the wedding nook?
The wedding nook.
Yeah.
I love the wedding.
Yeah, I don't think that's on with a contract.
Okay.
We have someone already hired for the design, and I don't think we have can't remember. I think we're gonna try to have DPW do the installs, but I can't remember for sure.
Next up is Arbor Day planning.
I wanted to get this on the agenda because it's February and Massachusetts and National Arbor Day is in end of April. Jennifer and I have had some conversations with some other groups about it. I think Jennifer wants to talk about that more in outreach, but yeah, we just wanted to start thinking about when we're going to do it. There are some seedlings available through Massachusetts Tree Wardens and Foresters Association or Arbor Day Foundation, so we could do a seedling giveaway. I think we're kind of running out of time, so maybe we can make this a bigger agenda item next month.
That sounds right to me. I really want to be respectful of folks' time. So if we have time to push something and we're not going to lose momentum, let's push things to next month. And
Yeah,
we knew
I'm okay with that, but I would just like to ask people to think about, because I think we might like to try to have it a little bit closer to the Adopt a Tree launch, especially time when families are around. So when we're thinking about dates, maybe something, Arbor Day is April 28th, I think it is, the last Friday of April. So as we're thinking about dates, everyone, can we maybe try to think of May, which won't give us a lot of time, but I'd prefer to have families around, and summertime is more difficult. So as we're thinking about that, and pushing it off is fine, we'll have time, but just keeping in mind that then there will be a fair amount of organizing to do for it. So.
Sounds good.
Oh, Amy's put some seedling links in the chat. Yeah.
I was just responding to a question about what species. Those are the species. Look at them.
Oh, I see. Got away from me.
That little tiny chat window.
Yeah, it's like all of it. Yeah.
Most exciting thing I've heard recently is that the city is actually planning to transition to Zoom.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Yeah. All right. Do we have just running the list, and let's do quick updates. I don't want to skip anything. Any news on Adopt a Tree?
Actually, that could stay fairly brief. I mean, the Adopt a Tree working group is meeting. We've been doing this for what, 3 or 4 years now. So we kind of have sort of a rhythm in place, and we've allocated out our task list. So I think that we can continue to work offline as our working group and get the details ironed out, and we can revisit that in March. How does
Excellent.
that sound?
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
I guess just one thing, Crystal, while you're here online, if we could talk briefly at some point maybe about the adoption certificates. Would you have time for that? I can shoot you an email about it.
Yes. My email is a trash fire currently due to a personal situation. So if you've sent me email recently, I have not read it.
Okay.
Let me figure out if there's a way for me to send you my phone number so that you can text me or call me.
That would be great. I think you can private message me here if you prefer, or however you wish to do that. Sounds good.
All right. Anything else on outreach that can't wait till March?
Amy, did you want to just say a quick thing about the poster contest? Just because we did that today.
Yeah, just quickly this morning, Jennifer and I went to West Somerville and we did a little tree workshop with the 2 5th grade classes there, which was really awesome. We did a little presentation about the value of trees. We went outside and they did some tree observations and a little scavenger hunt matching twigs with trees. And then they came back inside and they started working on their posters. So we have at least one school submitting posters, which is awesome.
That's fantastic. And I would say, are there any other updates on any of the rest of the agenda here, which I'm realizing that I'm totally not sharing because I'm talented that way. But any other updates that are timely?
In terms of Adopt a Tree and Arbor Day stuff and like trying to involve the schools, I have gotten, I've recently gotten in touch with my ward's school committee member, and that seems like a potentially very responsive position if folks haven't previously thought of it, to contact your school committee members and say, hey, do you have relationships with some teachers who might be interested in this? So I wanted to mention.
Okay, I actually, that's a really good idea, and I want to add that into our youth engagement document. So remind me to ask you again about that so that I can, during our other conversation, so I can put that in the document, which I just don't have open right now. But that's a really good idea. Thank you, Crystal.
All right. Anything from SAP? No obligation, just making the space.
We had a great visioning goal session, set aside a couple hours and really got into it and created a great list of what we're going to accomplish this year. So more to come.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I have anything about pesticides? Okay. I have no updates on the TPO. Anything on most wanted weeds?
No, sorry, I have not.
And then I'm not aware of any motion on GLX screening. I'm not even aware that we have signed a contract on the community path yet.
I did get some info from Viola, but not that exciting, and can wait till next time unless you're really anxious.
I think the whole city is all kind of like waiting for the contract to be signed and then we kick into motion.
Yeah.
All right.
Jennifer and I and a woman named Patricia Wild met up with Calvin Layton, who is a consultant for the Green Line, not the Green Line, for the MBTA on like landscape plantings. And I don't have my notes in front of me, but he does vegetative management plans, and he is interested in sort of keeping an eye on this and considering it when he does put in his plan, which goes in at the end of April or early May. It's a 4-year plan. Every city needs one. And so he's just someone that we met with, and hopefully we can meet him again this upcoming month to take a ride on the Green Line from Union Square or from Leechmere out to Medford and get his thoughts. And he would be willing to come to a meeting with Viola. So that's sort of next on my agenda, is to set up a meeting with those on myself, Jennifer, Vanessa, you, and since Patricia is now part of this, I would include her. So, but do you have anything interesting from Viola? You said you didn't have any interesting, but you did have an update.
Yeah, I mean, mostly things we already know about, like we're waiting on this contract, the signature between signing it over to the city. I did get a species list of what was planted on the slope. There was some fun, lots of native wildflowers. I cannot find the email right now. But basically, like, they're hoping to open the path in spring sometime is the latest update from the MBTA, and then in the meantime, MBTA and city are like co-responsible for different aspects of maintenance, but in terms of the larger discussion of adding more plants, what, where, how, why, that has to happen later. So
do you know if the plants they added were actual plugs or if they just
no, it was a seeding
mix? If you have that, I would love to know that seed mix, if you find that correspondence.
Yeah, there was definitely some good ones that I hear you talk about a lot. Some milkweeds in there, and different asters, goldenrod, but I can send this list to the group.
Cool.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Was that a?
Oh, I was just thanking Vanessa for that, because I think that if we have these, for sending that to us, because I think that if we can couple that information with talking to Calvin, we might really have a nice little plan for ourselves as to how we can best green up that corridor. So I'd really love to take a look at that too. Thank you.
All right, the last thing is approving the minutes. Does anybody want to ask for more time to review them? All right, so then let's do a joint motion to, well, I think we need a roll call vote in remote. So we will run the list on approving the minutes of January 19th. Amy Myrtle.
Yes, approve.
Brett Miller.
Approve.
I approve. Jennifer Clifford.
Approve.
Leigh Grossman.
Approve.
It passes, but let's keep going. Vanessa Bikili.
Approve.
And Tori Antonino.
Approve.
It passes unanimously. Congratulations, everybody. All right, so that concludes the agenda. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Thank you,
I
everybody,
second.
for staying in for
Oh.
10 minutes. This was a really great meeting, super productive, and I really appreciate it. See you in a month.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
Chris.
Bye.
Bye.